Hi guys, Steve the Transit Camper, welcome back to the channel. Following on from that episode about Hilda Murrell and her murder, we have found another local murder from 1967, and we're going to talk you through that while we go on a stealth camp. Probably find a pub, do a car park one. Catch you in a bit. So as you saw, we have got Baby along with us and Cat the dog. She's gone and lay down now, hopefully in the back. We're going to head off firstly to Bellevue Road, to the railway bridge, where this victim was last seen by friends who were walking her home. So this young girl would have been walking from that direction towards the railway bridge, where she parted company with the two friends. So the girl's name was Madalene Joan Lee, and she was the daughter of 52-year-old widow Dorothy Lee, who lived just over there. Dorothy Lee reported that her daughter had got on the 8 p.m. bus to go into town, that way down Bellevue Road. She was meeting up with friends to go to the fair in Frankwell. Carol Barnett was one of those friends, and it was Carol Barnett and her younger sister that walked Madalene home and left her somewhere around this bridge to continue the very short walk back to her house. After parting company with her friends, Madalene would have walked towards town over this Bellevue railway bridge, and we're going to walk that route now. Although the route is not detailed in any of the newspapers that I've been looking at, it seems obvious to me that she would have come this way. And she would have turned left here onto Oakley Street. So she would have continued along here. She would have then turned left here at Oak Street and continued on her journey. So it would now have turned midnight. So it would have been the 8th of April 1967, when Madalene is only about 200 yards from her home. She would then have crossed the road here to get down her own road, which is Longdon Avenue. So obviously I'm not going to walk right up to where she lived, but I will show you from a distance the house where she lived. And it's that house in the centre of the screen. So it's at this junction at 12:10, which would be the 8th of April 1967, where residents of this neighbourhood heard a car's brakes screeching. It also says in the papers that some residents heard a scream as well. So a witness called Miss Presley heard the screech and the brakes and the scream and came out to see what the commotion was all about. Miss Presley witnessed a young man around about 28 who was quite broad, smartly dressed, with short brown hair or dark hair, get out of his car and start trying to move a young girl that had been knocked over by his car. Another witness in the area saw exactly the same thing, and he watched the chap bundle the 18-year-old into the back of his car. Miss Presley asked the man if he needed help and should she phone an ambulance. He said, "It's okay, love, I'm taking her for some medical attention." The other witness also heard something similar, where he said, "I'm taking her to the hospital." Witnesses also described the car as a light 4-door saloon, possibly two-tone. Once the young girl had been put into the back of the car, the driver got in the driver's seat and proceeded down this road and went past Madalene's house on the right, heading out of town. So parts of the case that we don't know anything about really is which direction the car was coming from, but I would assume it had come off Bellevue Road, had turned right and then the first left, and that takes him to approach that junction where Madalene was knocked down. And as I said, he then proceeded down Longdon Avenue towards town. So we're just walking down now to these gates, but on the morning of April the 8th, 1967, William Hayward, who was a foreman of this sandstone quarry, was opening up the site for the day. Now these gates have probably changed, obviously, and it does say keep out, and this was just mud at the time, and I've got some pictures to show you. But when he opened the gates, which I'm going to guess were here on this boundary line, He opened the gates, got in his car, moved forward, went to shut the gate, and he noticed to the right-hand side of the lane the huddled body of a young girl that was partly dressed. It was Madalene Joan Lee, and she was face down in a puddle with some undergarments tied around her neck. So that's the site where she was found. We're not going to hang around there because obviously it's private property, but we're going to take Cat the dog for a walk in this beautiful woodland owned by the community, and we'll talk to you a bit more about the crime as we walk around. And this looks like a well-trodden path in these woods. Absolutely beautiful. So William Hayward obviously raised the alarm, and the police got to the scene and obviously made it a crime scene very, very quickly. Some key piece of evidence they found at the time were some whiskey bottles. They don't actually say what make or brand the whiskey bottles were, and I didn't see any other comments in the newspapers about those whiskey bottles, but they were found there at the site. And they obviously also found Madalene and confirmed that she'd been sexually assaulted and strangled. So other key pieces of evidence found at the time were tyre tracks, which they quickly stopped anybody from disturbing. Tyre tracks of a car which looked fresh. They also noticed that Madalene, who obviously wasn't named at the time, but a way of identifying, she was wearing a signet ring and a gargoyle type ring, which looked like the type that either the Pat Collins Fair were giving away free or she'd got from a vending machine at the Pat Collins Fair in Frankwell. So the police quickly started an investigation on this one. To be fair, they didn't hang about at all. They got a volunteer from the police station who was about the same build as the victim. They dressed her in very similar clothes and jewellery and took her to the fair on the 8th of April, and they mingled with the crowd to see if anybody had spotted her from the previous night. The police also issued a photo fit picture of the suspect and showed that around the fair too, to see if anybody recognised the person. Now I did find an anecdotal piece of evidence, and that's from a friend of mine who's in her 70s, and she told me that a chap was reported to be washing his car in Middletown Square in the Monkmoor area at an unusual time of between 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning. And she tells me that it was a milkman that saw that happening, and he reported that to the police, which may well have triggered this chap as a suspect, and police did pay him a visit. This man was interviewed by the police on the 8th, and on the 10th, and on the 12th. And on the 14th, they got a break in the case. Absolutely beautiful, this place. For something so tragic to happen very, very close by over there, this is a place of absolute outstanding beauty. Talking of which, there's Cat the dog. You all right, baby? So when the police visited this man, he was obviously extremely worried, and they thought he felt panicked, and he expressed the wish that he didn't want his wife to know that he was being interviewed. He agreed to give his clothes, he agreed for them to look at the car, and he agreed to give the shoes that he was wearing the previous night. When they went to collect the items that he agreed to give them, he then said that his wife was heavily pregnant, and this was all very worrying for him, and he didn't feel as though he could go to work that night. In the meantime, the newspapers had done their job well. So they'd got a story out on the 8th in the afternoon edition of either the Shropshire Star or the Shrewsbury something or other, not sure the name of the paper, but they got a description out of the girl, hoping to identify her pretty soon. So it was on the 8th of April that Lawrence Lee, a 21-year-old, and the brother of Madalene Lee, who hadn't come home the night before, read the newspaper. Immediately, he contacted the police, and the police later visited Madalene's mother. Madalene's mother said that she'd got on the 8 o'clock bus to go into town, and she was going to the fair, the Pat Collins fair, and she presumed that she'd gone to stay with friends, which she's normally done before, and that's why she hadn't come home that night. She was obviously identified as her daughter. This is a fantastic woods for a stealth camp. Anybody who's new to the channel, my name is Steve the Transit Camper, and I do stealth van camping, and I do wild camping, sometimes with my wife, who likes to be called Baby on the channel, sometimes with Cat the dog, and we have a bit of fun, something to do on our YouTube channel. So if you like and subscribe, that would be really nice. If not, don't worry, enjoy the video. Lawrence Lee, Madalene's brother, did his own investigative work, and he went to see the friends that had walked her home and the friends that she'd been with the night before, and they confirmed that they walked her home as far as that railway bridge, and then they waved goodbye, and Madalene carried on walking alone. They hadn't suspected anything going wrong on that night. It was just a normal night walking home. So it's very hard to be accurate on the next bit, but around about the 10th, a 25-year-old from Monkmoor in Shrewsbury was arrested and taken into custody. His name was John Smallman. John Smallman was a married man. As I said earlier, his wife was heavily pregnant, and he was also a coal delivery man. So I'm going to head back to the van with Baby and Cat the dog, and we'll put the drone up over the scene, give you an idea of the directions, and then I'm already hungry. We're going to look for somewhere to eat and somewhere to stealth van camp for the night. There's a good amount of parking here. You can get about 5 or 6 cars there, I would say. But I think it's a little bit desolate to be stealth van camping. And it's not very good phone signal either, so we won't be able to watch a film. So this is the place. Mousecroft Community Woodland, Shrewsbury Town Council. Okay, let's get the drone up. So we're back in the van. I've took the drone up. It's good, not a lot to see, but it does show you the scene. Because I get a bit nervous in isolated places, I'm not happy to camp here. Baby would be happy to camp here, wouldn't you? She camp anywhere, she doesn't care. But me, I get really nervous. I need to be able to phone someone if something goes wrong and the signal's not brilliant. And I want to be able to watch a film as well. So we're going to go and find a pub, and I think I've got one in mind, and we'll go in search of the Guinness. So apart from the Shropshire Star archive, I've searched every newspaper that's available that was printing this story at the time in 1967, and I haven't been able to find one picture of John Smallman, who was the #1 suspect in this case. So we're just coming up to what we think will be the stealth camp for tonight, the Beacon Pub. Oh, it looks busy. There are lots and lots of people here. Is there going to be any parking spaces? The sun really brings people out, and it's looking very grim. I can't get in there, I'm too long, aren't I? Yeah. Okay, so first place is a fail. Let's carry on. So we're coming up to our second location, which is called the Oxon Priory, which is a basic gastro pub, simple food, but it's got a much bigger car park. Let's see if we have any luck in here. Well, it certainly looks good straight away. Oh, there's loads of spaces. When you're parking a van for a stealth camp, you want to be strategic. Get your door against a hedge, or you can nip out in the night if you need to water your cat. And that is perfect. I always lock the front up ready, so I don't need to get in the front again. Well, let's go. You looking forward to something to eat, baby? What about a pint of Guinness?
No, thank you.
No, thank you. Well, I am looking forward to a pint of Guinness, and I hope they sell it. I'll tell you a bit more about the crime after, but let's have something to eat first. See, this pub is just on the edge of town, so people aren't driving to get here. They can't be bothered. Because when it's sunny, everybody walks. Yes, please. Got ourselves a sharer. What do you think, baby? Nice? No comment. Uh-oh, number 2. Baby always eats in sections, so these are the peas that are going. Stray pea, and there. You got busted. Well, baby did better than me. I struggled a bit with that crust.
I'm a pie eater.
She is a pie eater from Wigan. Bit of extra for someone special. Come on, let's go. Not a bad meal, baby. The bill was £55, so we're happy with that. It was all right. What are you hiding for?
I'm not.
And we've got this for Cat the dog, a little sausage. Right, let's get back in the van. We'll get back to the story. We've only had 2 pints and we feel drunk.
We don't.
I
And I
do.
haven't had any pints.
Well, I do. Oh yeah, you haven't had any pints. You may as well have though. Anyway. My lady. Ta-da! Good girl. Where you going? Where you going? Cabin fever again. On. Right. And this is for our little girl. What do you think of that, cat? Take a bite. She doesn't like the silver foil. That was very kind of him to do that for us, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Try and taste it, cat. It's nice. So we're back in the van. We've had a good meal, nice little pub, nothing fancy, but it was just good, genuine value for money meal. So we enjoyed that, didn't we, baby?
Yes, we did.
Cat's had her sausage, as you saw. She loves that. Doesn't taste anything you give her. They're just animals. Anyway, so John Smallman, the 25-year-old coalman from Monkmoor in Shrewsbury, he was interviewed on the 8th, the 10th and the 12th. And then on the 14th, he finally admitted to the crime. He broke down. He threw a packet of razor blades onto the desk where he was being interviewed by CID officers. And he said, "This is what I was going to do tonight. I was going to slit my own throat. I wanted to tell you, but I couldn't. And on that night, I couldn't return home to my wife." So he was clearly regretful and remorseful for what he'd done, but he still did it, didn't he? So he went on to explain that on the night that he knocked her over, he fully intended taking her to the hospital. But once he'd started travelling in that direction, he realised that he'd been drinking, and he had been drinking whiskey that night. So in an act of panic, he says, he took her to Mousecroft Lane. There he sexually assaulted her, he raped her, and he strangled her with her own underwear, and she was left dead. He also said in that statement that after he had done what he'd done, he drove to the railway lines and he was stood there for a long time, all night. In fact, he couldn't go home to his wife. So on the 6th of July, he was at Gloucester Assizes Court and he pleaded not guilty to murder. He was in fact found guilty. It took 27 witnesses during the trial at various locations where they'd seen his car and identified him as well. It took the jury 3 hours to deliberate and they came back with a plea of guilty, a verdict of guilty, I should say. So he was remanded in custody and he was sentenced to life in prison. Doesn't actually say what life in prison is. You know, is life 25 years and now he would be out by now, or was life in them days? Not sure. Tried to find out some information from the newspapers, but there's no follow-up stories that I could find on whether he's still in prison or whether he's even still alive. But he was found guilty, but he later appealed. So in that later appeal, they brought forward for the defence a consultant psychiatrist named Dr. O'Flanagan, and he identified through imaging, I would imagine, that this chap, John Smallman, had got a small scar on his brain, which they said could have affected his personality and caused some type of seizure. He said that this may have been caused from trauma when he was a young kid, or from a high fever, or from something else, some illness when he was young. And he said that Mr. Smallman was unable, when this was affecting him, to be able to distinguish between what was normal behaviour and what was bizarre behaviour. And he said in court he was likely to do the same sort of offence in front of the police if that's the way his brain took him on that occasion, if that was the effect that it was having while he was having one of these seizures. So the courts did buy it, but amongst other things, they did reduce his sentence to manslaughter, or his verdict to manslaughter, but they didn't reduce the sentence. They said that life in prison was a fair penalty for what he'd done. So he remained life in prison. Cat's having a drink. So there you go. The Shrewsbury case of Madalene Joan Lee from 1967 in April. The police acted really well on this. It didn't go to a cold case. It was solved almost immediately. Absolutely fantastic. Big respect to all those CID people that got involved, Scotland Yard, everyone. And they got this case solved very, very quickly. Sad loss, 18-year-old girl from Shrewsbury. Horrendous, and our condolences to the family. And hopefully we've been respectful recording this video and just highlighting this piece of history from the 60s.
She's going to be angry.
Got the cameras on. Good views. So we're settled in now. And we're going to go to sleep. We haven't brought any breakfast, so we're just probably might have a coffee in the morning. We'll see how we feel. I did bring some milk. But we're going to settle down. I'll leave you with the cameras and the view for a little while. And we'll see you in the morning. Hope you enjoyed this one. Catch you in the morning. Everyone slept reasonably well. Raining outside this morning.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. Oh. Well, if you got this far in the video, this is a very key part of this story. On January the 19th of 1967, John Smallman stood in court accused of doing the identical thing. He'd given a girl a lift home from somewhere, just picked her up randomly. He'd taken her up a quiet lane. He put his hands around her neck and he said to her, "You are going to die." She put up a fight. She bit him on his thumb and she screamed the place down. John panicked, apologised to the girl and took her home. And that was 3 months before Madalene Joan Lee was murdered. He was found guilty in court and he paid a £25 fine and £11 costs. Isn't that a shame that they didn't realise that he would go on to murder? Awful. Anyway, we are going to get ourselves up. We're not going to bother having a coffee this morning. It is raining out there. It's a bit miserable, so we're going to get ourselves home. And we're going to have a coffee at home and breakfast. What do you think, baby? I enjoyed this one. I enjoyed all the research to it. Very sad story, but it's our history, good or bad. We'll catch you again. You've been watching Steve the Transit Camper, Baby and Cat, and we'll see you next time. Take care. No comment. Cold morning. Know what about? 6:26. See you next time.